Thank you for continuing your study into BSB 40507 Certificate 4 in Project Management. I am Trudy Robinson. This presentation will discuss the needs and requirements and identification of stakeholders. In particular, the objectives from this session are for you to understand and apply your knowledge of stakeholders and what they represent. Identifying internal and external stakeholders affected by or contributing to the project. Also understanding the stakeholders' impacts and their potential issues, their inputs into other planning exercises for the project, and the actual stakeholders' interests themselves. So, what is a stakeholder? In effect, a stakeholder is an individual, an entity, or an organisation who will be affected by a project or who may contribute to the project. Be aware, if there were no stakeholders, you wouldn't have a project. Their needs are usually the purpose of the project. They do not go away. New stakeholders may be introduced at any time and old stakeholders may leave. Their needs and requirements often change. If you do not have a clear identification of the stakeholders and their needs and requirements at the beginning of the project, documented and signed, then if either of these change, the potential is that then your project may change direction and the objectives may be lost. It's a very difficult situation to be able to manage. Unhappy stakeholders can and will make the project a misery, and the chances are your life a misery as well during your involvement. Stakeholders, like clients, are never wrong. So, ignore them at your peril. Manage your stakeholders and their requirements and expectations closely. In simple terms, what usually happens in a project is we identify the stakeholders, we agree what they want and need, we undertake the day-to-day activities of the project, we meet their requirements, and then we communicate with them. However, in most projects what happens is once the project actually commences, we're so busy doing the work and communicating with the world, telling them what we're doing, how we're doing it, that any changes in the stakeholders and what their expectations are not managed. The potential is your project will go off the rails and it will be a difficult project to meet the expectations and have a successful outcome. There are internal and external stakeholders. Obviously, most internal stakeholders work with or for the company. Owners, for example, may include shareholders, family owners, or joint venture partners. Management may be executive team or a board, directors, team leaders, sponsors, or even the project managers themselves. If, for example, the project is an IT rollout of software, local employees may have different expectations or requirements than national or international employees. External stakeholders may be the recipient of the outcome from the project or any other external body that may govern or have an influence on or receive information from the project or the results of the project. Stakeholder impacts. It's usually at the beginning of the project where you'll sit down with yourself, fellow colleagues, and research who the stakeholders are within the project. It is worth putting the time and energy into this exercise to be as clear as possible, because once you have identified the stakeholders, this inputs to many other project planning activities that will be undertaken, including your time management. Stakeholders may be the resources that are actually undertaking the work for the project. Communication management, change management, who you are talking to throughout the life cycle of the project. Contract and procurement, some of the stakeholders may be contractors or contributors to the project. And of course a project scope, who has the key stakeholders, sponsors and team members included within the project scope. It's therefore worthwhile going through the exercise of clearly identifying the stakeholders early in the project. There is no perfect science when it comes to dealing with stakeholders and what their needs and requirements may be. Each one of these expectations or examples of interests should be clearly identified in the scope document. Anything that's a critical requirement should be listed under the critical success factors. This will be covered in more detail in the scoping subject. Again, there is no perfect science in how you identify stakeholders. It's worthwhile undertaking workshops or getting teams of people together who have experience in the type of project or the stakeholders that may be impacted. Ask other project managers and other team members to contribute. People love to be asked for advice. Previous projects, if you can get hold of the previous project material, it's also a useful source of information. Once the tasks from the work breakdown structure are identified, it is often very clear the types of resources or skills that are required to be able to undertake those tasks. And it's also useful to be able to ask the stakeholders, what do you want from this project? What do you expect? How will this affect you? What will you need from it? One of the most important things from a project manager is to be able to stand up and ask questions and question whether something is legitimate or complete or contradictory. The questions that you do not ask will turn into the issues and the problems that cause you the most grief during the course of a project. In most projects, there's usually a sponsor who's one of the key stakeholders. It's worthwhile ensuring that the sponsor signs off on every key deliverable or every planning phase of the project. So it's worthwhile discussing and ensuring that the sponsor is satisfied that the list of stakeholders and their requirements are complete. In summary, know who your stakeholders are. Understand which one of those stakeholders input to the project and who gets affected by the project, who is a recipient from some project deliverable. Ensure the stakeholder list is signed off prior to using this for the other project planning exercises. Assessment criteria. You will need to provide the tool that you use to record the stakeholders as part of your project documentation in your printed source folder and also as an electronic template. It's likely that this document will form part of the same document as the work breakdown structure. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.